it, we're gonna serve it, we're gonna serve it today. We're gonna have some fun talking about knitting. So when first learning how to knit, there's basically 4 skills that you need to learn. Once you've learned one cast on, one bind off, knit and purl, you are good to go on a wide variety of projects. But one of the cool things about knitting, I think, one of the reasons I love it so much is because there is always so much more to learn. And sometimes when you're a beginning knitter, I know this was the true for me, is once you learn those 4 basic skills, what are the next ones to learn? Today I have 3 essential skills that every knitter should learn in order to be able to knit more than a square or a rectangle. So hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give this video a thumbs up, and find out the 3 essential skills to get you beyond knits and purls. As we get started with today's video, quick reminder that as always down in the description box, you will find time codes to different parts of the video in case there's something specific you want to get to. I always hope that you'll watch through the whole thing at least once, but sometimes you want to get to some important information, so time codes are below. Also down in the description box, you will find a list of materials and resources that I think are really helpful from today's video. Some of these will have clearly marked affiliate links. If you click on one of these links, do a bit of shopping, I might earn a small commission, which helps support my channel and what I am doing here on the YouTubes and on the internets, trying to spread the joy and love of making things. Usually pretty straight. So if you utilize one of my affiliate links, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. And if you're like, Carrie, I can't, it's totally cool. Really just glad you're here watching a video today. One of the really cool things I think about knitting is what we are actually doing when we knit is we are creating fabric. I don't know why I find that so cool, I just do. Like we are literally taking lengths of twisted fiber and making interconnected loops to create fabric, and that fabric can become hats and gloves or scarves or whatever, blankets, pillows, all sorts of things. And the first basic shape that we learn to knit is squares and rectangles. And that's because squares and rectangles don't require any shaping. You begin with a certain number of stitches and you end with a certain number of stitches, and your stitch count remains the same throughout. If you would like to move beyond squares and beyond rectangles and knit things like triangles, at some point you're gonna have to start shaping your fabric. And that involves increases and decreases. So the first skill that I think that we really have to learn when we start moving beyond knits and purls are your increases. Most often what you're going to see in beginner patterns are single increases, and there are 3 basic single increases that you see: the knit front and back, the make one, and my personal favorite, the lifted increase. But for today, I'm going to demonstrate for you the knit front and back. So guess what? It is watch time! The knit front and back is usually abbreviated as a KFB, and sometimes you'll even see it referred to as a bar increase, and you'll see why in just a moment. So to do the knit front and back, it is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to knit into the front leg of the stitch, and then you're going to work into the back leg of the stitch. So I'm going to knit into the front, pull my yarn through, but I'm going to leave my stitch that's on the left needle right there, okay? I'm gonna just leave it there. I'm gonna take my needle, I'm gonna swing it to the back, I'm gonna insert it through the back leg, like so, okay? Throw my yarn, and I now have a new stitch there. And if you look real closely, you're gonna see that little bump right there. That is a purl bump. And that is a little bar, and that is why this is sometimes referred to as a bar increase. The thing about bar increase is that the bar always will be to the left side of the stitch that you first worked.
So let's look at this again in slow motion. I'm going to bring my right needle over and knit through the stitch like I normally would, but I'm going to leave that stitch on the left needle. All right. Then I'm going to take my right needle and I'm going to swing it towards the back of my work and insert the needle into the stitch through the back leg. A little tricky there, but there, I got it. So now my needle is through the back leg. I can go ahead and wrap my yarn, make that new stitch, and I now have 2 stitches coming out of 1 stitch.
The knit front and back is a pretty straightforward increase to do. The thing that you have to get used to is the idea of knitting through the front leg, swinging your needle to the back of the work, and then knitting again through the back leg of that stitch that's on your left needle. I'm also going to show you how the purl front and back works, because there's what you do on the knit side, you can always do with a purl as well.
So I have my yarn to the front of the work, and I find it easier to actually first work through the back leg. So I have my needle towards the back of the work, and I bring it through that back leg to do my purl stitch. I then swing my needle to the front, and I purl through the front leg. And again, you can see there is that bump right there, that bar to the left of the first stitch I worked. Let's look again in slow motion. I have my yarn to the front and my needle to the back of the work. I bring my needle over to the left side of that leg on the back of my needle and then bring it through the stitch. Wrap my yarn, pull the yarn back as if to purl, and I swing my needle to the front and I insert my needle just like I was doing a normal purl through the front leg.
Here are those 2 increases. Here's that first increase that I did. You can see that bar right there. That bar is the new stitch I created when I knitted through the back loop. And then right diagonal to it is another bar, and that's where I did the purl front and back. And that bump mixes in really well with garter stitch or ribbing because it just looks like a purl bump. And that's when, like, I think the knit front and back is like at its best. However, the downside to the knit front and back is that bar, because it's not a discrete increase if you're working with stockinette fabric. Like, you're gonna know the bar is there. And in fact, when I first learned how to knit, I didn't know there were other increases other than a knit front and back. I was taught I learned the knit front and back from a book. No other increases were mentioned. I started knitting stockinette and I had to do an increase, so I did knit front and back, and there was that bar, and I was so annoyed and frustrated because it was like, well, all of my increases are really obvious. The bar can be a decorative element in stockinette, and a lot of times in raglan sweaters, the knit front and back will be used when creating the raglan line because that bar creates a little decorative feature to the work. That being said, as a beginning knitter, as you start working patterns that are a little bit more advanced, a little bit more beginner, intermediate, or advanced, you start seeing the KFB way less, and you start seeing the make one quite a bit. And actually I have a dedicated video about that if you want to learn more about it. And you sometimes even see the lifted increase. And I probably need to do a video on the lifted increase because it is my favorite increase. And if you want me to do that video, let me know down in the comments below. So after you learn increases, the next thing you need to learn are decreases. And decreases are going to narrow your fabric as it eliminates columns of stitches from your knitting. And when you're first starting off, the first types of decreases you're going to learn are single decreases. And in single decreases, you're taking 2 columns of stitches. This is what I like to call my finger dance. 2 columns of stitches, and you are bringing 2 stitches together to make 1 column of stitches. So you take 2 columns into 1 column. Now the thing about this, however, is that when you bring 1 column of stitches over another column of stitches, whether it's doing decreases or cables, you create a lean. There's always a lean to single decreases. So you can have right leaning decreases, and that is when the left column of stitches comes over the top of the right column of stitches. you get a right-leaning decrease. And the other kind of decrease you have are the left-leaning decreases. And the left-leaning decreases, your right column of stitches come over the top of the left column of stitches, like this, and you get a left-leaning decrease. So the most common type of decrease that you see in patterns is the right-leaning decrease, and that's because it's the easiest to do. There are several different ways you can do it, but the one that you're gonna see 99.999% of the time is a knit two together. And the knit two together is almost like the default decrease if no decrease is mentioned. Like if you read a pattern and you're going to be doing like, it says to decrease evenly across a row, all those decreases, you're probably gonna do a right-leaning decrease, which will be the knit two together. And it's just like the KFB, it's exactly what it sounds like. You're gonna knit two stitches as if they were one. I have my 2 stitches here on my left needle. I'm going to take my right needle and I'm going to bring it to the left side of the second stitch from the tip. And then I'm gonna knit those 2 stitches together as if it were one stitch. And that is a knit two together. And if you look closely, you might even see how it leans to the right.
So let's look at it one more time in slow motion. Bring the right needle to the left of the second stitch on your left needle. All right, insert your right needle through those 2 stitches as if it was one stitch. Wrap your yarn, pull the new stitch through, and boom, there it is.
So let's take a look at the purl two together, and just like the knit two together, the purl two together, we're gonna purl into 2 stitches as if it were one stitch.
So I'm going to take my right needle and I'm going to insert it into the stitch as if to purl from right to left, wrap my yarn, and then pull it through. So it's actually a very straightforward motion. Let's look at it again in slow motion. I insert my needle into my first stitch as if to purl, then the second stitch as if to purl, wrap my yarn, pull the new stitch through both those stitches as if it were one.
It's hard to see the lean of that on the right, or on this purl side of the work in stockinette, but when you get to the stockinette, the knit side of stockinette fabric, you'll see that it also leans to the right. So yeah, that's the knit two together. It's straightforward decrease to do, and like I said, it's kind of the default decrease, but it does have that right lean, and sometimes you want to do something in knitting called mirrored decreases, and that's why you also have left-leaning decreases. There's lots of reasons why you have left-leaning decreases, but that's one of them, is so that you can mirror your right-leaning decreases with left-leaning decreases. The interesting thing about this is there are a couple different ways to do a right-leaning decrease, but there's almost no reason not to just always do a knit two together. It's so straightforward to do in comparison to some other right-leaning single decreases. But left-leaning decreases, there are actually several options on how to approach that type of decrease. And I have a whole video about doing left-leaning decreases that I will link down below. But the 2 most common left-leaning decreases that you see are the SSK, which is a slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, knit those 2 stitches together. It's easier to see than to explain. But then you also have the slip, knit, pass the slip stitch over, and that was actually the first left-leaning decrease that I learned. You don't see it all that commonly anymore, at least in patterns that are written by people in the United States. I think it's more common in patterns that come from designers in the UK, or you see it most often in lace knitting. It's actually a kind of a fun decrease to do, but the SSK has sort of become a dominant technique between the 2. And then of course there are a couple other options of doing a left-leaning single decrease. So again, if you want to learn more about those, I do have that video and I will link it down below. So today I'm just giving you a little taste of doing an increase and a decrease, but there is a whole wide world of increases and decreases, and sometimes it's a little quicker to have a little book on hand maybe in your knitting bag to help refresh your memory on how to do these. And a book that I love, a great reference resource for knitters, is Increases, Decreases, 99 Step-by-Step Methods. Find the perfect technique for shaping every knitting project. Whew, that's a mouthful. It's by Judith Durant. It's absolutely fantastic. It covers like pretty much every way that you can create a new column of stitches or take away a column of stitches. So if you want to learn more about how to shape your fabric, highly recommend this book. The third skill that I think that every beginner knitter needs to learn in order to move beyond knits and purls are yarnovers. And yarnovers are kind of cool. I say, like, when is a stitch not a stitch? It's when it's a yarnover. But that's a really technical thing that I don't need to get into. If you want to know more about why I have this little like joke that makes no sense unless you think of yarnovers the way that I do, let me know down in the comments below. I'll make that video for you. I'll do a knitting secrets reveal about yarnovers. But anyway, let's get to basics in terms of yarnovers. What is a yarnover? The yarnover is kind of a humble, in my opinion, humble maneuver in knitting. It is literally taking your yarn and bringing it over the right needle to create a new loop of yarn, almost, to knit into on your next row to create a new column of stitches. So it is kind of an increase. But the thing about a yarn over is if you just knit into it regularly, you're going to create a hole in your fabric.
What? Why would I want a hole in my work?
Well, yarn overs create eyelet patterns and is the basis of lace knitting. In fact, after you learn how to do yarn overs and you learn how to do decreases, you're pretty much set up to learn how to do lace knitting. Interesting thing about yarn overs, however, is how you do it as an English knitter and how you do it as a continental knitter can look quite different. So I'm going to demonstrate it in both techniques. I'm going to do it first English style, and then I'll show you yarn overs as a continental knitter. Here I am, and I'm going to do my yarn over. So I'm going to take my yarn, I'm going to bring it to the front of the work. Now, when I first learned how to do yarn overs, I would bring the yarn to the front of the work and then bring it over the needle and start my next stitch. It's actually more movement than you need to do.
To do a yarn over when the next stitch will be a knit, you just bring the yarn to the front of the work like you do for ribbing, and then knit into the next stitch. And that will automatically create your yarn over. You can see it right there. There's the yarn over, and you can already see the hole that's formed. Let's look again in slow motion. I take my yarn, I bring it in between the two needles, then I knit into the next stitch.
It's all about bringing that yarn basically to the front of the work before you do a knit stitch, and that's going to create a yarn over.
Sometimes in older patterns or ones from the UK, you see a direction to bring yarn forward and then knit into the next stitch. That is actually a direction to create a yarn over. It's just telling you how to do it as opposed to just saying yarn over.
So in English style knitting, just like if you were doing knit purl combinations like ribbing, you bring the yarn to the front of the work, but instead of purling into the next stitch, you knit into the next stitch, and that's going to create your yarn over.
In continental, it's the same idea, but a different motion.
Okay, so I am in continental. What I'm going to do to create the yarn over is I'm going to bring my right needle, I'm going to bring it underneath the working yarn like this. Then I'm going to go into the stitch and knit. And that's how I've created the yarn over continental style.
And again, we're going to slow this down so you can really see what's happening. So again, I bring my right needle underneath the working yarn. And then I just go in and I knit my next stitch. I have to just make sure that working yarn stays over the top of my right needle as I work that stitch. And there it is.
So I'm gonna do a yarn over on the purl side. I'm gonna show you how to do it English style first. So here's my yarn, it's already to the front, but I'm going to purl into the next stitch. So my yarn wouldn't go over my right needle. So to do a yarn over when I'm going to purl into the next stitch, I have the yarn to the front of the work. I'm going to bring it to the back of the work and then purl into the next stitch. And boom, I have a yarn over. It's a little more awkward looking on the purl side than the knit side. And I find on the purl side, you almost have to get used to the motion of it because it seems like it's not gonna work when you start doing it. It's like, that's not gonna work, that's not gonna work, that's not gonna work, but it will. If you bring the yarn to the back of the work and then purl into the next stitch, it's going to create that yarn over. It's just physics. It will happen.
Once again, in slow motion, my yarn is to the front. I purl into the next stitch. So I bring the yarn to the back of the work and then I purl into the next stitch. If this motion is super awkward for you, you can always bring the yarn over the needle and back to the front of the work before you purl into the next stitch. It's a little bit more motion, but you can do that. All right, now let's look at this in Continental.
Okay, so I'm here. I'm going to do a yarn over where on the purl side here. So I find personally when doing yarn overs on the purl side with Continental that the easier thing to do is for me to actually bring my right needle underneath the yarn and then bring the yarn back to the front, right? So now the yarn over is sitting there securely on my needle before I purl my next stitch.
So one more time in slow motion, I bring my right needle underneath the working yarn, and then I bring my yarn back to the front. When I move it back to the front, I make sure that yarn goes between the two needles. Once my yarn is back to the front and that yarn over is over the right needle, I then go in and purl into the next stitch. I really want to emphasize when I bring my yarn to the front, that yarn is in between the two needles. That's what's going to keep that yarn over.
So yeah, yarn overs, really great thing to know how to do as a knitter. Especially if you want to learn how to knit lace, it's essential that you learn how to do your yarn overs. So there it is. Those are the 3 next level skills I think every beginning knitter needs to learn: an increase, a decrease, and yarn overs. And once you get these and you learn them and you're confident in them, it's just going to open up a whole new array of knitting possibilities for you. And you'll be far more confident going into projects for garments and anything that involves shapes other than squares and rectangles. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with other knitting friends. Liking videos, sharing videos, commenting on videos are all great ways to let YouTube know that this is a space worth checking out, and then I get recommended to other knitters and fibery people, and yeah, it helps just grow this community, and it's a great, easy way to support my channel. If you have not already, please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Hitting the notification bell will ensure that you get notified whenever I upload a new video, start a live stream, or have a short. I've been doing some more video shorts lately, kind of for fun. So yeah, it's kind of a way to just kind of keep in touch with the channel. But I am totally dedicated to doing my long form videos once life frees up a little bit, because it's been a little busy lately in my life. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, weeknight, whenever you may be watching this. And as always, happy health and happy making. Bye. Oh my God, it's been so long I've blinked. As we get started with today's video, once again, as always, let's try that again. So when we learn to knit, one thing stop, think, talk. There's only like one decrease in a row, or you're decreasing, you're doing, stop think. Okay, let's do it. Let's level up. We're gonna level up. Time to level up. We're gonna level up. Okay, whew. I do that so I relax. I do that so that I relax and I'm not stressed out while I'm knitting. So that's why all the crazy, it's not crazy, just all the things I do. Okay.